The meeting of the Affordable Housing Committee. As we get started, I will read the motion about meeting electronically pursuant to Governor Lee's Executive Order number 16 regarding electronic meetings as extended by Executive Orders number 34 and 51. I make a motion that this committee meeting agenda constitutes essential business of the Metropolitan government, and that this meeting electronically is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Please say
Aye.
Very good. Any opposed? Signify by raising your hand or saying nay. All right, that is approved. So with that, I will begin the meeting. This is not an official meeting, and I believe because we are not making any official votes that we do not need roll call. Is that correct, Mr. Cooper?
Yes, you don't need a roll call for this one.
Okay, so I will make note of people who are here, and I appreciate you being there. We had a good discussion a week ago to discuss Councilmember Brandon Taylor's BL 2022-24 that deals with giving notice of sale of property, and a number of good issues were brought up and suggestions were made for ways to make sure that this bill actually accomplishes the goals that it was intended to accomplish. And it seemed it would be very productive to have the opportunity to discuss proposed amendments rather than wait and have competing amendments on the council floor. So that is the purpose of today's meetings. Hannah sent out 4 proposed amendments. There may be others that come in the next week or so, but we at least have those 4 before us. If people need to go looking for an email from Hannah Zeitlin with those 4 amendments, have at it. And I will there are 2 from Councilmember Taylor. I have 1 and Councilmember Nash has 1, and we can certainly entertain other issues. So with that, I will turn it over to Councilmember Taylor to talk about his 2 amendments.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Thanks so much, Councilmember Allen. We indeed had some really great conversation last week with the stakeholders that this bill would definitely include. And within those conversations, one of the things that that I heard in detail was the time requirement, that the time requirement may be a little too long and lengthy. And so in the amendment, the first amendment that I have been pursuing was to shorten that time frame for 60 days. And also adding a bit of the mirroring of the Tennessee Code that talks about the landlord and the property rights of the landlord. And so that's what this second amendment would do mostly. This first amendment mostly would be moving from 90 days to 60 days written notice to residential tenants prior to the listing of the leased premises. And so those are the goals that I have with that one. The second one would be to add more information to mirror the state code and the violation. So adding the information regarding the violation of $50 a day that you do not notice. So if you sell the property and it's 60 days, it'll be 50 times 60 is what the fee would be, or the fine, excuse me. And so I wanted to add that information to have some clarity to the bill.
Thank you for that explanation. I would recommend that we take these one at a time, unless there's an objection to that philosophy. So with that, I will look for hands raised if there are comments on the first amendment. Seeing none. That was the one that shortens it to 60 days. The second one adds a $50 per day, I assume that's per unit, violation, which is allowed by state law as well. Any comments on the second proposed amendment? Okay, I see no hands on that one. See a few more council members joining us as well. If there are no specific comments on that one, then I will continue to the third proposed amendment, which is mine. And technically, it is probably actually just a separate ordinance. What I heard the committee saying was that the concern we were trying to address was the situation where someone is asked to vacate the premises without adequate notice after a property changes hands. The problem in many cases was not the actual change of ownership, it was the end of a lease that frequently followed that. And so whether this is a companion bill or a replacement, I would be open to discussion on that as well. But amendment number 3, which is actually a separate ordinance, I believe, would again echo state law, which specifically addresses different types of leases. I had handed out at our last meeting a summary of the different types of protections that are offered in state law under the Uniform Landlord-Tenant Act. And it treats week-to-week properties differently. It says if you have a week-to-week tenancy, then by state law, the landlord is already required to give a 10-day notice. And for a month-to-month tenancy, the landlord is already required to give 30 days notice, and that is written into state law. And so the proposed bill that, or proposed language that I'm offering simply mirrors those two statements. We can come back and talk later about other ways to address different types of protection for short-term leases, but that's I think an issue of its own right. And then I have added, in the absence of a written rental agreement that requires 60 days or more written notice of intent not to renew a lease, a landlord must provide a tenant written notice of at least 90 days prior to the end of a lease of any intention not to renew a lease. And specifically language that that says that a landlord, despite the transfer of ownership, is required to adhere to the existing lease, which is often the case in many leases, but this spells it out very specifically. And similar to Councilmember Taylor's, adds a $50 fine. I think per day is a great idea. Mine simply says $50 per rental unit. So that is another one. Are there comments on that particular proposal? I'm looking. Do I need to give people time?
Councilmember, I do see Mendez and Taylor.
Yes, thank you very much. Okay, Councilmember Mendez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Let me ask a couple questions about this one. Have you talked to the Nashville Bar Association or the Napier Levy Bar Association about this?
I have not talked to those. I have talked to the lawyer who represents GNAA who suggested that, and I'm happy to do that before this gets introduced in September. That's an excellent suggestion.
As I'll put on my former president of the National Bar Association hat here for a second. The National Bar Association doesn't provide pro bono services. Other related organizations do. So
Gotcha.
You really have to end that down a little bit.
Okay, will do. Thank you.
And I can help you with contacts at both of those.
That'd be great.
And then more generally, is most of this simply a recitation of state law?
A and B are a recitation of state law. C is a mirroring of what we did for the notification for increasing rent, which was if it's not if there's not already a written agreement, then we would require one. So that is what is new. And again, the $50 fine, as you've stated, is in state law. So the notification in Part C is new.
So, and my apologies for missing the last meeting. I was traveling to drop a kid off at college and missed the meeting, unfortunately. So I might be repeating some of what got discussed last time. I mean, I still feel pretty strongly like all of this legislation, even with the amendments, dramatically muddies the water on the state of law in Nashville and creates differences between county lines. And I suspect that clever lawyers are going to take the air out of whatever punch we're trying to provide here. And I'm just, especially when we get to an amendment that just repeats what's in state law, that seems confusing to me, clarifying.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. I appreciate those comments. Councilmember Taylor and then Councilmember Toombs.
Thanks, Mayor. In this amendment here, I do see this as actually as a separate ordinance to pursue from the Affordable Housing Committee. In the section C, I think is the require 60 days or more written notice intent to renew a lease. I believe that that's the when we look at the intent for the original bill, the intent is to provide notice a little bit earlier than after, or a little bit earlier than a sale, and not necessarily connecting with renewing or a current lease per se. And I believe that this is, I think that this has some, actually, I like the wording and see that, but I think it would be well written in a separate ordinance. You may be on mute, Councilmember Allen.
Oh, I am on mute. Thank you.
You may have hit unmute.
Twice. It says mute.
And we can hear you now.
Okay. Okay. Councilmember Toombs.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. Question regarding the 90-day notice in the absence of something being included, a notice period being included in the lease. My understanding of the Landlord-Tenant Act was that regardless of what's in the lease, there's a default 30-day notice that's required. So if the lease didn't mention anything about termination of the lease, there's a default 30-day notice that's required. Is that not the case? That was my understanding.
I will defer to the lawyers in the room. In looking through it, what I saw was specific information on week to week and month to month specifically required 30 days notice. There was no language in there about a 12-month that I saw, but I am not a lawyer, so I will defer to anyone in this room that has more experience in that. So if anyone can speak to what the Landlord-Tenant Act says with regard to 12-year, annual leases, I would appreciate that input. I'm looking for hands that were not already up.
Councilmember, this is John Cooper. I don't have the Landlord-Tenant Act pulled up, but I'm doing that right now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, jump in when you find that, and I will move on to Councilmember Soar and then come back to answer that question, Councilmember Toombs.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know I came in late, so I just wanted to be recorded as present for the meeting.
Okay, thank you. I did note your presence. I appreciate you coming in. So Mr. Cooper is looking through the Landlord-Tenant Act. to verify whether it does default to 30 days for an annual lease or not. My understanding is that most good leases include that, but there's nothing that actually requires it. Any other questions or comments while we're waiting? Councilmember Mendez, is that a new request to speak?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I'm basically filibustering your silence and saying stuff I would have said when y'all met last time and I couldn't make
Go
it.
for it.
I've been, I think, in my 5 years in office, helped lead the charge on a lot of progressive-minded things. I really feel like this legislation, while well-intentioned, is going to lead to just not enough benefit for the difficulties that will get inserted into the marketplace and the way law works. I know we're talking about amendments, but I feel strongly, based on how the original draft was, all that's going to happen will be greater confusion for tenants and district council members. If we passed the current version, landlords would end up giving more notice than necessary and creating situations where potential sales are disclosed to tenants, potential deals, potential transfers, and then different members getting dozens of phone calls from people saying, I just got this notice saying that my landlord might sell my building. I don't know whether he's selling it or not selling it. What do I do? I hope that we can get this contained to a place where if it provides a benefit to tenants, we get people who deal in the transfer of assets like these, apartment buildings like these, to make sure that we're not going to over notice tenants on potential transactions and scare them into thinking there's going to be a sale when in fact there might not be a sale. Thank you. You're muted again, Berkeley.
Thank you for that. Thank you for your comments. That was discussed last week, so I appreciate you bringing it back up. Mr. Cooper.
Yes, the only statute I'm seeing that's applicable is 6828-512, which refers to the week-to-week and month-to-month, as you referenced. I think based on my discussions with Hannah, that it's public policy that a written annual lease have a set termination date. I'm not finding anything in the actual statute.
Thank you. That's what I had heard from some lawyers as well. Let's see, new hands. Councilmember Taylor, I think your hand is newly up, and then perhaps Councilmember Toombs wants to respond, but I'll go to Councilmember Taylor first.
Yes, in responding to Councilmember Mendez, we did discuss that in detail last week in regards to the confusion. And one of the things that we're not asking, I guess, in this legislation is for us to give them the verbiage that they're using. And so I believe that there's an opportunity for the messaging to be clear on the end of the landlord to the tenant to clear up any confusion into the communication process.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Toombs, did you have a new request to speak?
Yes.
Okay, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I am looking things up off the fly, but I'm looking at Tennessee Code Annotated Title 66, Chapter 7, Section 109B, And it says for all other defaults in the lease agreement, a 30-day termination notice from the date such notice is given by the landlord shall be required for the purpose of eviction of a residential tenant. I think that is where I'm getting the 30 days from, but again, I'm looking stuff up on the fly, trying to remember from when I was doing my
I think
lease.
that's outside of the Landlord and Tenant Act.
Okay.
That's for jurisdictions that don't have the Landlord and Tenant Act, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, because that's 6628. Well, I'll leave it to the lawyers on this committee to refine that search further. If y'all could provide information to us, that would be helpful. Councilmember Nash, I see your hand up for the first time. Do you want to make sure you get something in about your amendment as we have the last, approach the last 10 minutes of our meeting?
Sure, I've offered a substitute. I share some of the concerns here. The substitute basically says once a property has sold, that within 7 days, the new owner will notify the tenant and let them know that it's under new ownership, provide some contact numbers for the owner or the agent for the owner to help answer any questions that a tenant may have. I'd intended to add some verbiage in there that you'd have to wait at least 60 days before a tenant could be asked to move, but I've been informed by Council Cooper that in fact that impedes upon our state landlord-tenant law that kind of controls that. I continue to have serious questions about tying it to a listing because properties, so many of them are not listed anymore. Just got a phone call today. Somebody wants to buy my house. And then at the date of sale or trying to, those sale dates can change, closing dates can change so often that I find it difficult to tie any kind of notice to that day. So I appreciate the intent, and then I'm finding some of these fines awfully punitive. Not every landlord is a big money person, I assure you, and I think we need to be very careful we're not penalizing some of the mom and pop operations here that may not be aware of some of the changes in the law and the timelines and the like because of the confusion that we might be causing. I appreciate your time. I know I'm not in the committee and I'm grateful.
All right, valid points. Thank you. Let's see, I see hands up. These may or may not be new. Councilmember Suara.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to speak to a CM Nash amendment. I think that what we were trying to avoid is a situation where somebody is caught where a sale is happened and then they have a quick turnaround that they have to leave. And I think if you wait for the new owner to notify the tenant and all of that, that's when we're getting into these troubles because that is not happening in some situations. Last week when we met, we talked about, the last time that we met, we talked about checking in to see whether these happen more with the mom and pop, or does it happen with large apartments? Do we have an answer to that? You know, if there was anything on that would, because I think part of the conversation is that for large apartments that have a whole lot of tenants, when they sell, they want to keep those tenants, and that's the one that is saying might involve a whole lot, there'll be more confusion. And so if we can look at where this is happening, the lack of notice, people having to move suddenly, if it doesn't happen more with those buildings, we're saying that there's a possibility of exempting them. And so I wanted to know if we have any, if we have that report back or answer to that question.
Thank you. I appreciate your reminding us of that. I do not have an email from the person who offered to do that research, so I will follow up with that and share that with the committee when it is handed back to me. I think that's an excellent question. And yeah, and I appreciate you raising the issue of the large apartments as opposed to single family home, because there was talk of making a distinction between how we treated those, and I don't see any amendments dealing with that specifically. I see Councilmember Taylor, Mendez, and Toombs' hands up still, and we have 5 minutes left. So I will yield the floor to you three in that order.
Thank you. And that Councilmember Swore, I won't belabor the point. I think she brought up very similar thoughts that I had, and is that the thing that we're trying to do here with the intent is not allow, not necessarily allow, but for that sale to come across. And then, because if we look at the Tennessee code within, if it's a month-to-month lease, the notice will come along that the property has been bought, as well as the same notice that will come along that you have to, that will terminate the lease, and you'll have to vacate the property. So when I look at this substitute, I just don't feel that it meets any intent that I've had on the front end with this. I would actually urge my colleagues not to vote for it, but with this intent. And then then to answer your question, Councilmember Swore, I've also been working to get some of that information for the large apartments versus the one-offs. And so I'll continue to work on that too as well, Councilmember Allen. And then one other point, I'm sorry, I have a note here. The punitive, this is with the law, and if of the $50, if Mr. Cooper or Ms. Eitland are available, with this law, this is, I'm trying to find the right words. This is under the Tennessee law. This is where it would fall with a $50 fee per day. So this was just to clarify the information of what enforcement or what will happen if you do not abide by the law.
Yes, Councilman, that's correct. The council or Metro is limited to a $50 fine per violation, and then it would be up to the court to determine whether to impose that on a per violation per day basis.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Okay, thank you. Councilmember Mendez.
Thank you. I just want to, I'll say it briefly because I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but as drafted, even with the amendment, the two requirements: give notice prior to listing. I know that there are lawyers in town who will advise their clients to give a notice once a year or right after they buy it, saying this may be listed at any time. And so that sentence is going to be evaded. It's very, very difficult to enforce. And I think people will give proactive notice and get around the thrust of that. And then the landlord must notify tenants within 5 days of a binding sale agreement of the closing date and anticipated date of vacating the premises. That is absolutely unworkable for a couple of reasons. One, when people sign contracts, more times than not, there are extensions that depend on how the due diligence process goes and or financing. And it's not unusual for the anticipated closing date on the day you sign the sale agreement to be off by 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. It can be off. And you also, if you're the owner, you do not have clarity about whether the buyer is going to seek to get rid of the tenants or not. You do not have clarity on that. And so all that'll happen is that sellers, in order to be most conservative and comply with the law, are going to say closing could be as early as 3 months from now, and the buyer may or may not kick you out. And they will have complied with this, and it will basically have not given tenants good information. Those are just a couple of reasons why I think this is unworkable in practice, despite its good intent.
Yes, Madam Chair.
Berkeley, you're still muted.
It's that fancy space bar thing. Councilmember Swar, you're recognized.
Yes, I want to, because I know we had a very productive conversation the last time, and I think that where I thought we ended was everybody, including the realtor people on the phone, agreed that the intent of this is good, and we're trying to come to a place where we can find a language that works to protect the tenant as much as not expose the landlord, and I thought we were heading towards that direction. So I don't want to bring us back and derail what we've been able to do. My recommendation is that we don't vote on any of these amendments today. The bill does not come before the body until September, and it allows us to get the report back from the real estate companies or the individuals that are supposed to come back to us with information. Let's get all of that. We want to work with them on the verbiage and then come up with something that works with everybody. That would be my recommendation, rather than pass some amendments to they change it later. If we can table all of this and then do that before the September meeting, that would be my recommendation.
Thank you. Good recommendation. We did not have any intention of voting today. This is simply an opportunity to discuss the options that have been brought before us so far. We are officially out of time, so I want to try to not push the budget committee late, so I will wrap this up. My understanding, Councilmember Taylor, is that this bill comes back on second reading, the first meeting in September. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there is time still to continue for us to learn more about implications and to respond to the comments that we've gotten. I would say, unless I hear from people, I will not plan on scheduling another work session, which will, we may or may not have an Affordable Housing Committee meeting, depending on whether there is other legislation to consider. So I would request people to continue to work with our in-house counsel and with the stakeholders as information that has been requested comes in. If you can send that through Hannah Zeitlin so that the rest of the committee can get it and we can make more informed decisions, we can continue to consider whether this is accomplishing our goal, if it can be amended to accomplish our goal, or if we need to listen to some of the other voices that we've heard. So I appreciate the careful consideration everyone is giving, and the goal of just trying to protect tenants in a workable way. So thanks for all the thought that has gone into that. Councilmember Suarez, your hand still up from the last time, or do you want to add something to that? Okay. Okay, with that, I will adjourn this meeting, and please be on the lookout to see if we will be meeting again. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and I will yield to Budget Committee next.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. And I'll do the 10-second countdown for our broadcast.